The key turned in the lock at exactly 11:47 p.m., and I knew my marriage was about to end. Not because Lena was late, she'd texted from the airport about delays, but because of what waited in my desk drawer. 3 weeks of private investigator reports, 14 photographs, one medical file that would change everything. I sat in our kitchen, laptop open, pretending to work on server maintenance schedules for the university. The cream envelope lay flat against the granite countertop, innocent as a dinner invitation. Inside, Damon Vossel's face smiled back from 8 different angles, 8 different women, 4 different nights in Rome. Miles? Lena's voice carried that particular lilt she'd developed lately, breathy, confident, like she'd discovered some secret about herself that the rest of us hadn't figured out yet. Honey, I'm home. Her heels clicked across our hardwood floors. Designer luggage wheels rolled behind her. The sound stopped in the doorway, and I looked up from my screen. She glowed. That's the only word for it. 3 days in Rome had bronzed her skin to a perfect Mediterranean gold. Her auburn hair caught the kitchen lights differently, like she'd had it professionally styled. The black dress she wore wasn't one I recognized, probably purchased during her conference shopping with company per diem. Look at you, I said, closing the laptop. Business travel agrees with you. Lena dropped her purse on the counter and moved toward me with this new walk she'd acquired. Hip forward, shoulders back, confident. She touched my face with fingertips that smelled like expensive hand cream. Miles, I have to tell you something. Her green eyes were brighter than I'd seen them in months. This trip, it changed me. I know that sounds dramatic, but I've never felt more alive. More like myself. Does that make sense? I nodded and reached for the envelope. Perfect sense. Actually, I have something for you, too. Oh? She perched on the stool across from me, crossing her legs. The dress rode up slightly. What's the occasion? Your homecoming. I slid the envelope across the granite. Open it. Lena's smile faltered for just a moment. Some instinct, maybe, recognizing danger. But curiosity won. It always did with her. She picked up the envelope, noted her name written in my careful block letters, and slipped her finger under the flap. The first photograph showed Damon Vossel, pharmaceutical executive, conference keynote speaker, sitting at the Hotel Artemide bar with a blonde woman in a red dress. They were leaning close, his hand on her thigh. The timestamp in the corner read, Tuesday, 9:47 p.m. Lena's face went completely still. Keep going, I said gently. The second photo, Damon with a different woman, a redhead, same bar, Wednesday night. His hand was in exactly the same position. Photo 3, Thursday, brunette this time, but the pose was identical, like he'd choreographed it. Miles, I don't understand. There are 5 more, I said, but you get the pattern. She shuffled through them mechanically. Friday night featured twins, actual twins, both blonde, both giggling as Damon whispered something between them. The metadata stamps were clear on every image. Location, time, even the camera settings Ronnie had used from across the bar. How did you... Ronnie Garrett. Remember him? Used to be a cop, now runs a private investigation firm. Turns out hotel bars are perfect for surveillance. Lots of mirrors, good sight lines, tourists with cameras everywhere. I leaned back in my chair. He's very thorough. Lena set the photos down with shaking hands. This doesn't mean anything. Damon was networking. These could be anyone. Colleagues, clients. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward her. Ronnie thought you might say that, so he did some research. The spreadsheet showed 14 cities, 14 pharmaceutical conferences, 14 different women. Each row contained a name, occupation, and photograph. I'd color-coded them by conference. Rome was highlighted in red, but there were 13 other colors stretching back 2 years. Jennifer Walsh, pharmaceutical sales rep, Chicago. I pointed to the first entry. Met Damon at the Midwest Pharma Summit. Thought she was having a life-changing affair until she found out about Rebecca Torres from the Denver conference, and Maria Santos from Atlanta, and… Stop! Lena's voice was barely a whisper. The interesting thing is the pattern. Always the same approach, same timeline. Day 1, professional introduction. Day 2, drinks and deep conversation about feeling unfulfilled. Day 3, the big seduction speech about living authentically. I scrolled down the spreadsheet. Day 4, goodbye, and promises to stay in touch that he never keeps. Lena stared at the screen like it might change if she looked hard enough. You're lying. You made this up because you're jealous? Because you can't stand that I'm finally… Finally what? Happy? I reached into the envelope and pulled out the last document. Funny thing about feeling alive, Lena. Sometimes it comes with consequences. The medical report was 3 pages long, but the important part was highlighted in yellow. Damon Vossel, patient ID 4471, diagnosed with a condition that required ongoing treatment and disclosure to partners. The prescription history went back 18 months. He knew, I said quietly. The whole time he knew. And he never told any of you. Lena's hands flew to her throat. That's impossible. He would have said something. We talked about everything. Did you? I stood up and walked to the coffee maker, needing something to do with my hands. Because, according to Jennifer Walsh, he told her the exact same story about his marriage being over in everything but paperwork. Same words about finding someone who understood his ambition. Even the same line about Rome being magical. You contacted her? I contacted all of them. The coffee maker gurgled to life. Turns out, women don't like being lied to about medical conditions, especially when they find out they're part of a rotation. Lena's phone buzzed against the granite. She glanced at the screen, and her face went white. That'll be Hazel Trevin, I said without turning around. Damon's wife. She's been very helpful, actually. Provided some of the financial records, travel receipts, that sort of thing. Apparently, she's known about his conference hobby for years, but never had enough evidence to do anything about it. The phone kept buzzing. Lena stared at it like it might bite her. Answer it, I said. She's been waiting to talk to you. With trembling fingers, Lena swiped the screen. Hello? Is this Lena Morell? The voice was clear enough for me to hear across the kitchen. Tired, but not angry. Just exhausted. Yes, this is Hazel Trevin, Damon's wife. I think we need to talk. Lena looked at me desperately, but I just sipped my coffee and waited. Mrs. Trevin, I think there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You're number 43, by my count. Congratulations. Hazel's laugh was bitter. Your husband seems like a decent man, by the way. Very thorough, very angry. Can't say I blame him. 43? Lena's voice cracked. Oh, you thought you were special. Honey, you're not even special for this month. There was a brunette from the Milan conference last week, and he's got another trip to Barcelona next month. Hazel paused. Though I suppose that's cancelled now. I set my mug down and walked back to the counter. Lena was gripping the phone so hard her knuckles had gone white. Mrs. Trevin, I had no idea he was married. He told me that his marriage was over, that his wife didn't understand him, that you were the first person to really see who he was. Hazel's voice was almost kind now. Sweetie, he's got a script, a very good one, apparently. Works on smart, successful women every time. Lena looked at me with something between rage and desperation. You planned this. You orchestrated this whole thing. I nodded. Ronnie started following him 3 weeks ago. Once we established the pattern, it was easy to predict. Hazel's been documenting his activities for months, building a case. Your husband just gave us the final piece we needed. What final piece? I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a small white card. Your appointment with Dr. Sarah Mitchell at the University Health Center. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. She's expecting you. Lena's face went ashen. Miles, no, you can't be serious. 18 months of undisclosed exposure, Lena. 43 women that we know about. The health department is very interested in contact tracing. I sat back down across from her. I already got tested, by the way. Results came back clean. Interesting how that works when you're actually faithful to your spouse. The phone was still in her hand, Hazel's voice a distant murmur. Lena ended the call and stared at the photographs scattered across our counter. How long have you known? About Damon specifically? 3 weeks? About you cheating? I shrugged. 11 months. You're not as subtle as you think, Lena. Different perfume, new clothes, suddenly working late every conference week. Plus, you stopped touching me after the Denver trip. I'm not stupid. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to be sure, and because I wanted it to hurt. I gathered the photographs into a neat stack. You want to know what feeling alive actually looks like? It's watching someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone else realize they're just another mark in a con game. Lena stood up abruptly, her stool scraping against the floor. I'm going to shower. We'll talk about this tomorrow when you've calmed down. Actually, we won't. I pulled another document from the envelope. This one thick, official-looking, bound with a blue cover. Divorce papers. I filed them yesterday. You'll be served officially on Monday, but I thought you might want a heads up. She froze halfway to the doorway. You can't be serious. Adultery, fraud, and reckless endangerment. Plus, I documented the financial infidelity. All those charges on our joint credit cards for clothes and dinners with him. My lawyer thinks it's a pretty solid case. Miles, please. We can work through this. People make mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. Lena, you didn't trip and fall onto another man's mouth. You planned this. You lied about it. You came home tonight ready to tell me how alive you felt while risking my health and our marriage for some pharmaceutical executive's midlife crisis hobby. She turned around slowly, and for the first time since she'd walked through the door, she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, scared, human. I did feel alive, she said quietly. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me. Really saw me. He saw you, all right. He saw an easy target. I stood up and walked to the sink, dumping the rest of my coffee down the drain. The woman in Chicago felt alive too. So did the one in Denver, and Atlanta, and Phoenix. You want to know what you all had in common? You were all married to men who actually loved you, and you threw it away for a man who collects women like conference swag. Lena's shoulders started to shake. I never meant for this to happen. No, you just meant to have your cake and eat it too. Keep the stable husband and the house and the joint bank account while you figured out how alive you could feel with someone else. I turned off the kitchen lights, leaving only the dim glow from the hallway. Well, congratulations. You're about to feel very alive and very single. I walked past her toward the stairs, then stopped. Oh, and Lena? I moved your things to the guest room. I figured you'd want some space to process everything. She was still standing in the kitchen when I reached the second floor, silhouetted against the granite countertop where her confession photos lay scattered like evidence at a crime scene. From my bedroom window, I could see her reflection in the kitchen's glass doors. She picked up one of the photographs, Thursday night, the twins, and stared at it for a long time. Then she set it down carefully and pulled out her phone. I knew she was calling him. Damon Vossel, pharmaceutical executive, conference keynote speaker, collector of unfulfilled wives. I wondered what his script was for this part of the con. Did he have standard responses for when the marks got caught? Probably something about how their love was worth fighting for, how they'd figure it out together. But Damon's phone would go straight to voicemail tonight, because 3 hours ago, Hazel Trevon had confronted him with her own stack of photographs, her own medical reports, her own divorce papers. By now, he was probably in some hotel room, trying to figure out which of his 43 mistakes had finally brought his house of cards crashing down. I pulled the curtains closed and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, Lena would go to her appointment and discover what I already knew from the medical records Ronnie had obtained. Tomorrow, she'd realize that her life-changing affair had changed her life in ways she never intended. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. But tonight, I slept better than I had in 11 months. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Not the comfortable quiet of a sleeping house, but the hollow emptiness that comes when someone who should be there isn't. Lena's car was gone from the driveway, her coffee mug absent from the sink. She'd left early, probably hoping to avoid another confrontation before her appointment. I made coffee for one and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Ronnie, 2 text messages, and an email marked urgent. The subject line read, "Package delivered, network activated." My laptop was still on the kitchen counter where I'd left it the night before, surrounded by scattered photographs like evidence at a crime scene. I opened Ronnie's email and found myself looking at a spreadsheet that had grown overnight. What started as 14 names had expanded to 27. Holy hell, I muttered, scrolling through the additions. Each new entry represented another woman who'd contacted Ronnie after word spread through pharmaceutical industry networks. Conference attendees who'd had their own encounters with Damon Vossel, their own 3-day romantic awakenings that ended with promises he never kept. My phone buzzed. Ronnie. "You seeing this?" His voice carried the satisfaction of a man who'd spent 30 years in law enforcement and still loved catching the bad guys. 27 women? How is that even possible? Guy's been busy and sloppy. Turns out pharmaceutical conferences are pretty incestuous. Same people, same companies, lots of overlap. Word travels fast when someone starts asking the right questions. I poured coffee and settled into my chair. What kind of word? The kind that makes lawyers very happy. Jennifer Walsh from Chicago? She's a paralegal when she's not selling pharmaceuticals. Soon as she heard about your situation, she started making calls. Professional curiosity, she called it. And we've got a pattern of behavior that goes way beyond simple adultery. Deliberate deception about medical status, financial fraud. He charged a lot of those hotel dinners to his corporate account. And something Jennifer's calling intentional infliction of emotional distress. I nearly choked on my coffee. That's a real thing? Real enough to get a lawyer's attention, especially when you've got 27 victims and counting. Ronnie paused. There's something else. Hazel Trevon wants to meet with you. With me? Why? Because she's been documenting this for 2 years, and you just handed her the smoking gun. Plus, she likes your style. Quote, finally a husband with some backbone. I looked out the kitchen window at our perfectly manicured suburban street. Mrs. Peterson was walking her golden retriever. The Johnsons were loading their kids into their minivan for soccer practice. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that my marriage had exploded in spectacular fashion 12 hours ago. Where does she want to meet? Eli's Tavern on Maple Street, you know it? I knew it. Dive bar near the university, the kind of place where professors went to drink away their tenure anxieties, and graduate students nursed cheap beer while complaining about their advisors. Dark, quiet, perfect for conversations you didn't want overheard. When? Noon. She's driving up from Hartford. Ronnie's voice turned serious. Miles, I gotta ask, you sure you want to go down this road? What we're talking about here, it's going to get messy, public. Once this train leaves the station, there's no calling it back. I thought about Lena's face the night before, the shock, then the anger, then the desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage, the way she'd tried to make it sound like a mistake, like something that just happened to her instead of something she'd chosen. The train already left the station, Ronnie. I'm just deciding whether to wave goodbye or chase it down. Fair enough. I'll text you Hazel's number. She's expecting your call. After Ronnie hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the photographs scattered across the counter. Damon Vossel smiled back at me from 8 different angles, 8 different women, 4 different nights. Each image a moment of calculated deception, a performance he'd perfected over dozens of conferences. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. At appointment. We need to talk when I get home. I typed back, no, we don't. Then I deleted it and wrote, take your time. The truth was, I didn't want to talk to Lena. Not yet. I wanted to talk to Hazel Trevon, the woman who'd been living with Damon's lies for 2 years, documenting his betrayals, waiting for the right moment to strike back. I wanted to understand how someone builds a case against their own spouse, how they function day to day while gathering evidence of their partner's systematic destruction of their marriage. I wanted to learn from an expert. Eli's Tavern occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house 3 blocks from campus, the kind of place that served decent burgers and didn't ask questions about why someone was drinking alone at lunchtime. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a corner booth with good sight lines to the entrance. Hazel Trevon walked in at exactly noon, and I recognized her immediately, despite never having seen her before. She moved with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent years managing chaos, scanning the room methodically before her eyes settled on mine. Mid-40s, auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a blazer that said professional but approachable. Miles Harron? She slid into the booth across from me, setting a leather portfolio on the table between us. Mrs. Trevon, thank you for coming. Hazel, and thank you for finally giving me what I needed to end this nightmare. She signaled the bartender for coffee, then opened her portfolio. I brought copies of everything: financial records, travel receipts, medical documentation, even some of his emails. His emails? Damon's not as careful with technology as he thinks he is. Shared laptop, shared cloud storage. Amazing what you can learn when someone assumes you're not paying attention. Her smile was sharp as a blade. He's got templates, Miles. Actual template emails for different stages of his conference relationships. She pulled out a printed email and slid it across the table. The subject line read, Day 2, Building Connection. Below that, a carefully crafted message about feeling an unexpected bond, about rarely meeting someone who truly understood the pressures of their industry. He sends variations of this to every mark, Hazel said. Just changes the names and a few personal details. Very efficient. I read through the email, recognizing phrases I was sure Lena had repeated to me during her recent phone calls from Rome. The language about authentic connection, about feeling seen and understood. Even her description of feeling alive had probably come from Damon's playbook. How long have you known? 2 years, officially. But I suspected longer. Hazel's coffee arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the mug like she was trying to warm herself. The pattern was too consistent. Business trip, good mood for a few days, then gradual return to normal. Like he was running on some kind of emotional high that slowly wore off. Why didn't you leave sooner? Because I wanted to destroy him first. Her voice was calm, matter of fact. Damon thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He's built his whole life around manipulating people, professionally and personally. I wanted to prove that he wasn't as clever as he thought. She pulled out another document, this one thick and official-looking. Class action lawsuit, fraud, intentional misrepresentation, reckless endangerment. Jennifer Walsh found us a lawyer who specializes in cases like this. Cases like this happen often enough to have specialists. You'd be surprised. The internet makes it easier to find patterns, connect victims. This lawyer has handled 3 similar cases in the past 5 years. Hazel flipped through the pages. The beautiful thing is, we don't need to prove emotional damages. The medical angle makes it a public health issue. I thought about Lena at her appointment, probably sitting in a sterile examination room, waiting for test results that would confirm what I already knew. How many of the women tested positive? 16 out of 27 so far. The others are still getting tested. Hazel's expression hardened. Damon's been walking around for 18 months, knowingly exposing women to a treatable but serious condition. That's not just adultery, it's assault. The word hung between us like a challenge, assault. Not the passionate mistake Lena wanted to frame it as, but a deliberate act of harm committed by someone who knew better. What happens next? We file the lawsuit Monday. The lawyer thinks we can get an injunction preventing Damon from attending any pharmaceutical conferences pending resolution. Essentially, we destroy his ability to make a living while the case proceeds. Hazel smiled grimly. Poetic justice, really. He used his professional platform to hunt for victims. Now that same platform becomes his prison. My phone buzzed with another text from Lena. Results positive. Coming home. Please don't do anything else until we talk. I showed Hazel the message. She nodded sympathetically. That's the hardest part for them, realizing they were victims, not participants in some grand romance. She gathered her documents back into the portfolio. Your wife seems like a smart woman. Successful, independent, exactly Damon's type. His type? Women who think they're too smart to be conned. He targets confidence, not vulnerability. Makes the fall harder when they realize they've been played. I thought about Lena's transformation over the past year. The new clothes, the different perfume, the way she'd started talking about feeling unfulfilled in our marriage. All of it probably scripted, fed to her in carefully timed conversations designed to make her feel special while undermining her existing relationships. He's good at this, I said. He's a professional. Pharmaceutical sales is basically legalized manipulation, understanding what people want to hear and giving it to them in exactly the right dose. Hazel stood up, leaving a 20 on the table. But professionals get sloppy when they think they're untouchable. Damon's about to learn that the hard way. She handed me her business card. The lawyer wants to meet with you and Lena next week. Your documentation, combined with what we've already gathered, should be enough to make this very expensive for him. What about his wife? You, I mean. This is going to be public, messy. Good. I want it to be public. I want every woman at every pharmaceutical conference to know exactly what Damon Vossel is. Her smile was fierce now. And I want him to spend the rest of his career explaining why he can't attend industry events anymore. After Hazel left, I sat in the dim tavern for another hour, processing what I'd learned. 27 women, 16 confirmed infections, a systematic pattern of deception spanning 2 years. What had started as my personal revenge against an unfaithful wife had become something larger, a reckoning for a man who'd built his life around exploiting others. My phone rang. Paul Martinez, my assistant director at the university IT department. Hey, boss. Sorry to bother you on Saturday, but we've got a situation. What kind of situation? Someone's been trying to access your email account from an external IP address. Multiple failed login attempts, password reset requests. Started about an hour ago. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Can you trace the IP? Already did. It's coming from a coffee shop downtown, The Grind on State Street. The Grind was 2 blocks from the University Health Center. Lena was trying to hack into my email, probably looking for evidence she could use to discredit my investigation or find something to use against me in the divorce. Can you lock down my account? Already done. Changed your password, enabled 2-factor authentication, flagged the suspicious activity. Paul paused. Miles, is everything okay? This seems personal. It is personal. Very personal. I stood up and headed for the door. I'll be in the office in 20 minutes. We need to secure a few more things. On Saturday? Trust me, Paul. This is important. As I drove toward campus, I thought about Lena sitting in a coffee shop, frantically trying to access my email, while her test results confirmed her worst fears. She was probably panicking, realizing that her attempt to control the narrative had failed before it started. But panic made people sloppy, and I was counting on Lena making mistakes. The university IT department occupied the basement of Morrison Hall, a brutalist concrete building that looked like a prison but housed some of the most sophisticated computer systems in New England. Paul was waiting for me in the server room, surrounded by humming machines and blinking lights. Show me what we've got, I said. Paul pulled up the security logs on his laptop. 17 failed login attempts, all from the same IP address. She's trying common password variations, your birthday, anniversary dates, pet names. She doesn't know I changed all my passwords 3 weeks ago. Smart move, but she's persistent. Also tried to reset your university account, your bank passwords, even your social media. Paul looked up from the screen. Miles, what the hell is going on? I sat down at my workstation and began pulling up files. My marriage is ending, and my wife is trying to find ammunition to use against me in the divorce. Damn, I'm sorry, man. Don't be. This is the best thing that's happened to me in years. I opened my secure folder and began copying files to an encrypted external drive. But I need to make sure she can't access anything she shouldn't. What kind of anything? I thought about the spreadsheet with 27 names, the medical records, the photographs, the divorce papers I'd already filed. The kind that could make this divorce very expensive for her. Paul whistled low. You want me to set up a separate secure partition? Something she'd never find even if she got access to your accounts? That's exactly what I want. We spent the next 2 hours building a digital fortress around my evidence. Encrypted folders, secure cloud storage, multiple backup systems. By the time we finished, my documentation of Lena's affair and its consequences was safer than the university's financial records. Anything else? Paul asked as we prepared to leave. I thought about Lena, probably still sitting in that coffee shop, still trying to hack into accounts she'd never access. Actually, yes. Can you set up monitoring on our home network? I want to know what she's doing online. That's ethically questionable. So is cheating on your spouse and exposing them to medical conditions. I handed Paul the external drive. Lock this in the department safe. If something happens to me, give it to Ronnie Garrett. Jesus, Miles, you sound like you're going to war. I looked around the server room, at the machines that had been my professional life for the past 8 years, at the normal world I was about to leave behind. I am going to war, Paul, and I intend to win. Sunday morning brought rain and a text from Lena that made my coffee taste like ash. Staying at Talia's tonight. Need space to think. Talia Morrison, Lena's best friend since college, enabler of every bad decision my wife had made in the past 5 years. If Lena was seeking refuge with Talia, it meant she was preparing for battle, not reconciliation. I was fine with that. My phone rang while I was reading the newspaper, actual paper, a weekend ritual Lena had always mocked. Ronnie's number. Morning, sunshine. Hope you're ready for some interesting news. Define interesting. Damon Vossel tried to leave the country last night, booked a last-minute flight to Frankfurt, probably planning to disappear into the European pharmaceutical conference circuit. Ronnie's satisfaction was audible. Customs flagged him at Logan. Seems there's now a federal investigation into his medical disclosure practices. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Federal? Health and Human Services got involved when they saw the scope of the pattern. 27 women across 14 states, deliberate concealment of communicable disease status. That's not just civil liability anymore. It's criminal. Where is he now? Released on his own recognizance, but his passport's been confiscated. He's stuck in Boston until the investigation concludes. Ronnie paused. Hazel's lawyer thinks this strengthens our civil case considerably. Our case? You're part of this now, Miles. Like it or not, you're a victim too. Spousal exposure, emotional damages, financial harm from medical treatment. The lawyer wants to add you to the class action. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at our neighborhood. The Petersons were loading their car for what looked like a weekend trip. The Johnsons' kids were playing in their backyard despite the drizzle. Normal people living normal lives while my world restructured itself around revenge and lawsuits. What does that mean practically? It means when this thing goes to trial, you'll be sitting at the plaintiff's table instead of just watching from the gallery. It means your story becomes part of the public record. Ronnie's voice turned serious. It also means Lena's going to hate you more than she already does. I can live with that. Can you? Because once we file tomorrow, there's no going back. This becomes a circus, and you're going to be in the center ring. I thought about Lena hiding at Talia's house, probably planning some kind of counterattack. About Damon Vossel trapped in Boston, his carefully constructed life collapsing around him. About 27 women who'd thought they were special, discovering they were just entries in a predator's database. File the papers, Ronnie. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. After Ronnie hung up, I spent the rest of Sunday preparing for war. I gathered every document related to our marriage: tax returns, bank statements, credit card bills, insurance policies. I photographed Lena's expensive clothes, the ones she'd bought for her conference trips. I documented the charges on our joint accounts for dinners and hotels in cities where she'd claimed to be attending business meetings alone. The pattern was damning. 14 conferences over 2 years, each followed by mysterious charges for romantic restaurants and luxury hotels. She'd been funding her affairs with our money, using our joint accounts to pay for her betrayals. By evening, I had built a comprehensive case for financial infidelity that would make the divorce settlement very interesting indeed. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I was in my office by 7 a.m., reviewing server logs and pretending to care about network security while I waited for the real day to begin. At 9:15, my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed Lena's office number. Miles Heron. It's me. Lena's voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. No, we don't. The lawyer says we do. She says if we can work this out privately, we can avoid a lot of unpleasantness. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying this more than I probably should have. What lawyer? The one I hired Friday afternoon, Margaret Chen. She specializes in cases like ours. Cases where one spouse systematically betrays the other while exposing them to medical conditions? That's a specialty now? Silence on the line. Then, Margaret says you're being vindictive, that you're trying to humiliate me instead of working toward a reasonable resolution. Margaret's right about the humiliation part. Miles, please. I know you're angry, but this doesn't have to destroy both our lives. It's not destroying my life, Lena. It's improving it considerably. I opened my laptop and pulled up the class action filing that Ronnie had emailed me an hour earlier. Speaking of legal matters, you should probably tell Margaret that you're now a defendant in a federal lawsuit, along with your boyfriend. What are you talking about? Damon Vossel, pharmaceutical executive, conference keynote speaker, and systematic predator. He's being sued by 27 women for fraud, medical deception, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. As his knowing accomplice in at least one instance of medical fraud, you're named as a co-defendant. I could hear Lena's breathing change, becoming shallow and rapid. That's impossible. I didn't know about any medical condition. But you knew he was married. You knew you were participating in adultery. And according to the text messages Ronnie recovered from your phone backup, you knew about at least 3 other women. You went through my phone? I went through our phone records. Amazing what you can learn when you actually pay attention to the bills. I scrolled through the evidence file Paul had helped me organize. 37 calls to Damon's number over 6 months, most lasting more than an hour. Text message logs showing coordination of travel plans, even some interesting photos you sent him from our bedroom. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Lena? I want half of everything. Her voice was different now, harder, more desperate. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, half of everything we built together. You'll get what the law entitles you to, after we deduct the money you stole from our joint accounts to fund your affairs. I didn't steal anything. $14,000 in restaurant and hotel charges for romantic getaways with your boyfriend, all paid for with marital assets. My lawyer calls it dissipation of marital property. It comes out of your settlement. I could hear her crying now, soft sounds that might have moved me a year ago. Now they just sounded like the consequences of choices finally coming due. Miles, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. No, you just meant to have your adventure and come home like nothing changed. You meant to keep living your double life until you got bored or found someone better. I closed my laptop and stood up. The problem is, actions have consequences, and your consequences are just getting started. What do you mean? I mean, Damon's story is about to become very public. Federal investigation, class action lawsuit, probably some interesting news coverage about pharmaceutical executives who prey on conference attendees. I gathered my files and headed for the door. Your name's going to be attached to all of that. Your employer's going to love reading about their sales rep's involvement in a medical fraud case. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, Lena. I'm just refusing to protect you from the consequences of your own choices. I stepped into the hallway and locked my office door. Your boyfriend built a house of cards and you chose to move in. Now it's falling down. I hung up and immediately called Ronnie. How'd she take it? He asked. About as well as you'd expect. She hired a lawyer. Margaret Chen. I know her. Good attorney, but she's walking into a buzzsaw on this one. Ronnie's voice carried grim satisfaction. The federal prosecutor wants to meet with you this afternoon. Seems they're very interested in your documentation. Federal prosecutor? This isn't just a civil case anymore, Miles. When you've got systematic medical fraud across state lines, it becomes a federal crime. Damon Vossel's looking at potential prison time. I walked through the university corridors, past classrooms full of students who had no idea their IT director's life had become a legal thriller. What does that mean for Lena? Depends on how cooperative she is. If she testifies against Damon, provides evidence of his pattern of behavior, the prosecutor might offer her immunity. If she tries to protect him, Ronnie let the implication hang. She'll protect him. She still thinks this is some kind of love story. Then she's about to learn otherwise. The federal building in downtown Hartford was everything you'd expect from government architecture. Imposing, sterile, designed to intimidate. I met Ronnie in the lobby at 2 p.m., both of us dressed in our best suits like we were attending a funeral. In a way, we were. Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Williams was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made you understand why she'd chosen prosecution over private practice. She led us to a conference room overlooking the Connecticut River and spread our evidence across a table that could have seated 20 people. Mr. Heron, I want to be clear about something from the start, she said, settling into her chair. This investigation isn't about your marriage. It's about a pattern of criminal behavior that used the pharmaceutical conference circuit as a hunting ground. I understand. Good. Because what I'm about to show you might change how you think about your wife's involvement. She opened a laptop and turned the screen toward us. Email exchanges filled the display. Messages between Damon and someone identified only as LM. We obtained these from Mr. O. Vossel's corporate account with a warrant. The timestamps go back 8 months. I read the first exchange, dated 3 months before Lena's Rome trip. Damon was asking LM about other women at upcoming conferences, requesting photos and background information. Lena was responding with detailed profiles, names, marital status, vulnerabilities, even suggestions about which women might be most susceptible to his approach. She was recruiting for him, I said quietly. More than that, she was actively participating in the identification and targeting of victims. Williams scrolled through more messages. Your wife wasn't just another mark, Mr. Heron. She was a partner. The room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the edge of the table and forced myself to keep reading. Message after message showed Lena providing intelligence about her female colleagues, helping Damon refine his approach, even coordinating travel schedules to maximize his opportunities. How long? I asked. Based on the email evidence, at least 8 months of active collaboration, possibly longer using other communication methods. Williams closed the laptop. Mr. Heron, I need you to understand what this means. Your wife isn't just a victim who made poor choices. She's a co-conspirator in a criminal enterprise that harmed dozens of women. I thought about Lena's performance the night she came home from Rome. The glowing skin, the confident walk, the speech about feeling alive. It hadn't been the afterglow of a romantic affair. It had been the satisfaction of a successful hunt. What happens now? We're offering your wife a choice. Full cooperation in our investigation of Mr. Vossel, including testimony about their partnership and any other criminal activity she's aware of. In exchange, we'll recommend reduced charges. And if she doesn't cooperate? Then she faces the same charges as Mr. Vossel: conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, potentially trafficking if we can prove they transported victims across state lines for illegal purposes. Williams gathered her files. Mr. Heron, your wife is looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Ronnie and I walked out of the federal building in stunned silence. The afternoon sun felt too bright after the fluorescent conference room, the normal sounds of downtown traffic too loud after the prosecutor's quiet revelations. You okay? Ronnie asked when we reached his car. I don't know. I leaned against the passenger door and tried to process what I'd learned. 8 months of planning, 8 months of targeting other women. She wasn't just cheating, she was hunting. Makes sense, though. Explains why she was so confident, so sure of herself. She wasn't just having an affair, she was running a business. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Margaret says you're being unreasonable. We need to meet tonight. I showed Ronnie the message. He shook his head. She still doesn't know, does she? Doesn't realize how deep in she is. Should I tell her? That's up to you. But Miles? Ronnie unlocked his car and opened the driver's door. Whatever you decide, decide fast. The prosecutor's going to make her offer tomorrow morning. After that, all bets are off. I drove home through the early evening traffic, past the familiar landmarks of a life that no longer existed. The grocery store where Lena and I had shopped together every Saturday. The restaurant where we'd celebrated our 5th anniversary. The park where we'd talked about buying a bigger house, maybe starting a family. All of it felt like someone else's memories now. Lena's car was in our driveway when I pulled in, which surprised me until I remembered she still had keys. She was sitting at our kitchen counter, still wearing her work clothes, looking smaller somehow than she had a week ago. We need to talk, she said without looking up. No, we really don't. Margaret thinks we can work out a settlement, avoid all the publicity, the court proceedings, just divide everything fairly and move on. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the sink. Define fairly. 50-50 split of all assets. I keep my retirement account, you keep yours. We sell the house and divide the proceeds. And in exchange, you drop the lawsuit. Stop cooperating with the investigation. Let this whole thing fade away quietly. I studied her face, looking for some sign that she understood what was really happening. But she just looked tired, stressed, like someone dealing with an unpleasant but manageable problem. Lena, do you know what conspiracy to commit fraud means? She blinked. What? How about racketeering? Trafficking? Do those words mean anything to you? Miles, what are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and opened the email from the prosecutor. The federal government has copies of your emails with Damon. 8 months of emails where you helped him target other women, where you provided intelligence about potential victims, where you actively participated in a criminal enterprise. The color drained from her face. That's not what we were doing. Then what were you doing? We were just talking about people we knew, about the conferences. Her voice was getting smaller. It wasn't criminal. We were just sharing information. Information that helped him identify and manipulate vulnerable women. Information that directly led to 27 women being assaulted. It wasn't assault. These were consenting adults. who were deliberately deceived about medical conditions, who were lied to about his marital status, who were manipulated using intelligence you provided. I sat down across from her. Lena, you're looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That's impossible. I didn't do anything wrong. You helped a predator hunt victims. You actively participated in crimes that crossed state lines and harmed dozens of people. I leaned forward. The only question now is whether you're going to cooperate with the investigation or go down with him. Go down with who? Damon, your partner, your fellow defendant in a federal criminal case that's going to trial next year. Lena put her head in her hands and started crying. Not the soft tears from our phone conversation, but harsh, desperate sobs that shook her whole body. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know it would lead to this. What did you think would happen? I thought it was just networking, professional development. Damon said it would help both our careers if we could identify rising talent in the industry. And the medical records? The deliberate deception about his condition? I didn't know about that until Rome, and even then, I thought maybe he just forgot to mention it. People make mistakes. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. She'd gotten involved in something way over her head, thinking she was playing a sophisticated game when she was actually just another tool in a predator's arsenal. The prosecutor wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, I said quietly. She's offering a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. What kind of cooperation? Everything. The emails, the planning sessions, the targeting strategies, how you met him, how he recruited you, how the whole operation worked. I stood up. And testimony against him at trial. Lena looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What if I say no? Then you go to prison with him. She was quiet for a long time, processing the magnitude of her situation. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Will you come with me? To meet with the prosecutor? Why would I do that? Because despite everything, you're still my husband. And I'm scared. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 7 years, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank accounts, who'd betrayed me more thoroughly than I'd ever imagined possible, who was now asking me to help her navigate the consequences of choices that had destroyed our life together. I'll drive you there, I said finally. But that's all. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Lena. Tomorrow's going to be the worst day of your life. Worse than today? I thought about the federal prosecutor's files, the evidence they'd gathered, the scope of the case they were building. Much worse. That night, I lay in bed listening to Lena crying in the guest room, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness. This was too messy and complicated for happiness, but the deep satisfaction that comes from watching justice finally arrive. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin. The federal building looked different in the morning light, less imposing, more like what it was, an office building where people went to work, even when that work involved destroying lives. Lena sat beside me in my car, staring at the entrance like it might swallow her whole. I can't do this, she said for the 3rd time since we'd left the house. You don't have a choice. I could run, leave the country. Damon said he knew people who could help. Damon's passport was confiscated, and he's under federal surveillance. His people helping days are over. I turned off the engine. Besides, running would just make everything worse. How could it be worse? I thought about the prosecutor's files, the evidence they'd shown me yesterday, the scope of what Lena had gotten herself involved in. Trust me, it could be much worse. We rode the elevator to the 7th floor in silence. Lena's lawyer, Margaret Chen, was waiting in the lobby with the kind of grim expression that suggested she'd finally understood what kind of case she'd taken on. Lena, "We need to talk before we go in there," Margaret said, guiding us to a corner seating area. "I've reviewed the evidence the prosecutor shared, and I have to be honest. This is much more serious than I initially thought." "How serious?" Lena asked. "The kind of serious where cooperation isn't just recommended, it's essential for avoiding significant prison time." Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. "They have emails, financial records, travel documentation, even recorded phone calls. The evidence of conspiracy is overwhelming." "Recorded calls?" Lena's voice cracked. "Federal wiretaps on Mr. Vossel's phones, authorized as part of the investigation. 8 months of conversations between you two, discussing target identification, strategy refinement, even profit-sharing arrangements." I stared at Margaret. "Profit sharing?" "Mr. Vossel was charging some of the women for consulting services related to career development. Your wife received a percentage of those fees." Margaret's expression was professionally neutral, but I could see the disgust in her eyes. "The government considers this evidence of a criminal enterprise." Lena looked like she might vomit. "I thought those payments were gifts, bonuses for helping with networking." "That's exactly what makes this conspiracy," Margaret said. "You were financially compensated for participating in the targeting and exploitation of victims." The meeting with Prosecutor Williams lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of Lena slowly realizing how completely she'd been manipulated, how thoroughly she'd incriminated herself, how little control she'd actually had in what she thought was a partnership. Williams laid out the evidence methodically, building a case that painted Lena as both victim and perpetrator. Damon had recruited her the same way he'd recruited his targets, identifying vulnerabilities, offering validation, gradually drawing her into increasingly compromising behavior. But unlike his other victims, Lena had become an active participant. She'd helped refine his techniques, provided intelligence about potential targets, even received payment for her services. What started as an affair had evolved into a criminal partnership that spanned multiple states and dozens of victims. "The question now," Williams said, "is whether you're willing to help us understand how Mr. Vossel operates, or whether you prefer to be treated as his equal partner in this enterprise." Lena looked at her lawyer, then at me, then back at the prosecutor. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Full disclosure of your relationship with Mr. Vossel, complete cooperation in our investigation, including testimony at trial, and assistance in identifying any other victims or co-conspirators we haven't discovered yet. And in exchange, reduced charges. Instead of facing the same penalties as Mr. Vossel, you'd plead guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges with a recommended sentence of 2 to 4 years, most of it served under house arrest with community service. And if I don't cooperate?" Williams's expression didn't change. "Then you face the same charges as Mr. Vossel: conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, possibly trafficking, 10 to 15 years in federal prison." The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic, Lena's shallow breathing as she processed her options. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "You have until 5 p.m. today," Williams said. "After that, we proceed with the assumption that you're choosing to remain Mr. Vossel's partner." Outside the federal building, Lena collapsed onto a bench and put her head in her hands. Margaret sat beside her, checking messages on her phone with the distracted air of a lawyer calculating billable hours. "This is insane," Lena said. 2 years ago, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep with a normal marriage and a normal life. How did I get here?" "You got here by making choices," I said. "Bad choices, but choices nonetheless." "I was manipulated." "You were recruited, there's a difference." I sat down across from her. "Lena, I've seen the emails. I've read the transcripts. At some point, you stopped being a victim and became a willing participant." "When? When did that happen?" I thought about the timeline the prosecutor had shown us, the progression from affair to partnership to criminal enterprise. Probably when you started taking money for it. Margaret looked up from her phone. Lena, I have to advise you to take the deal. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and cooperation is your only realistic chance of avoiding significant prison time. But testifying against Damon threw you under the bus the moment he got arrested, Margaret said bluntly. His lawyer contacted the prosecutor yesterday, trying to negotiate his own deal. He's claiming you were the mastermind, that he was just following your lead. Lena stared at her lawyer like she'd been slapped. That's not true. Of course it's not true, but it's what he's claiming, and he's got 8 months of emails where you're providing detailed intelligence about potential victims. A jury might find his story credible. So I have to choose between betraying him or going to prison for crimes he committed? You have to choose between accepting responsibility for crimes you both committed or pretending you're innocent when the evidence says otherwise. Margaret closed her briefcase. Lena, I've been practicing criminal law for 15 years. I've never seen a case where the evidence was this clear-cut. You participated in a criminal conspiracy. The only question is whether you're going to minimize the consequences or maximize them. We drove home in silence. Lena stared out the passenger window at the familiar streets of our neighborhood, probably wondering if she'd ever see them again as a free woman. I found myself thinking about the 27 women who'd been targeted by her operation, the lives that had been damaged by her choices. At home, Lena went straight to the guest room and closed the door. I could hear her on the phone, probably calling Talia or her parents, trying to find someone who would tell her this was all a bad dream. My phone rang. Ronnie. How'd it go? About as well as you'd expect. She's got until 5 p.m. to decide whether to cooperate or go down with the ship. What do you think she'll do? I thought about Lena's face when she learned Damon was trying to blame everything on her, the way her romantic delusions had crumbled in real time. She'll take the deal. She's not stupid, just naive. And how are you handling all this? It was a good question. 6 months ago, if someone had told me my wife was involved in a federal criminal conspiracy, I would have laughed. Now I was sitting in my kitchen, calmly discussing her potential prison sentence like we were planning a vacation. I'm fine, I said. Better than fine, actually. For the first time in months, I know exactly where I stand. You sure about that? Because this is about to get very public. Federal trial, media coverage, your personal life spread across the internet. Good. Let everyone see what she really is. Ronnie was quiet for a moment. Miles, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen a lot of people get consumed by revenge. Don't let that happen to you. This isn't revenge anymore, Ronnie. This is justice. Sometimes those look the same from the inside. At 4:30, Lena emerged from the guest room with red eyes and a signed cooperation agreement. She'd called Margaret, who'd called the prosecutor, who'd agreed to meet at 5 p.m. to formalize the deal. I'm going to testify against him, she said without preamble. Good. I'm going to tell them everything, the emails, the planning sessions, the money, all of it. That's what cooperation means. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table where this had all started a week ago. Miles, I need you to understand something. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But people did get hurt. 27 people, plus their spouses, plus their families. Your intentions don't change that. I know. I know that now. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. I was so stupid. I thought I was sophisticated, playing some kind of high-level networking game. I thought I was smarter than everyone else. You thought you were special, just like all his other victims. I was different, though. I was helping him. I was part of it. That's what made you more dangerous, not more special. Lena nodded, accepting the judgment. What happens to us? To our marriage? Our marriage ended the moment you sent that first email to Damon. Everything since then has just been paperwork. The divorce will be final before the trial? Probably. My lawyer says the criminal case actually makes the divorce easier, adultery, fraud, criminal conspiracy. No judge is going to award you any significant assets. So, I'll have nothing. No husband, no job, no money, no future. I looked at this woman I'd once loved, who'd shared my bed and my dreams, who'd thrown it all away for a con man's validation and a few $1,000s in consulting fees. You'll have what you chose, Lena. You'll have the consequences of your choices. She nodded and stood up. I should go. Margaret's waiting. Lena? She turned back. For what it's worth, taking the deal is the right choice. Testifying against him is the right choice. It doesn't fix anything, but it's right. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank the 27 women whose lives you helped destroy. If you're lucky, maybe someday they'll forgive you. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Closure. Not satisfaction. This was too messy and painful for satisfaction, but the sense that a chapter was finally ending. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. Saw the news. You okay? News. I opened my laptop and searched for Damon Vossel's name. The story was already breaking on pharmaceutical industry websites. Pharma executive arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. The details were vague, but it was clear the story was going to get much bigger. Tomorrow, everyone would know. My colleagues, my neighbors, Lena's family, our friends. The private catastrophe of our marriage would become public entertainment. I found myself looking forward to it. Let everyone see what Lena had chosen. Let everyone understand what kind of person abandons their marriage for a criminal conspiracy. Let the whole world know that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're too smart to get caught. Especially for people who think they're too smart to get caught. I poured myself a drink and raised it in a toast to the empty kitchen. The conference is over, Lena, and so are you. 6 months later, I sat in the front row of Federal District Court, watching my ex-wife take the witness stand against her former partner in what the media had dubbed the conference conspiracy. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, uncontested, brutal, final. Lena kept her car and her personal belongings. I kept everything else. She looked smaller in her navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a style that screamed, reformed criminal seeking leniency. The confidence that had carried her through 7 years of marriage and 8 months of conspiracy had evaporated completely. She was just another defendant now, hoping cooperation would save her from the worst consequences of her choices. Damon Vossel sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed and radiating the kind of arrogance that had made him successful in pharmaceutical sales. His legal team had tried every angle: entrapment, prosecutorial misconduct, claiming the women were willing participants in consensual relationships. Nothing had stuck. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. Prosecutor Williams stood at the podium, her voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom. Mrs. Morell, please tell the court how you first met the defendant. At the Chicago Pharmaceutical Summit, 18 months ago. Lena's voice was steady, rehearsed. He approached me at the networking reception, said he'd heard good things about my work. What happened next? We talked about the industry, about career development. He seemed very knowledgeable, very connected. He suggested we stay in touch. And did you? Yes. We exchanged contact information and began corresponding regularly. Williams walked Lena through the timeline methodically. The initial professional relationship, the gradual shift to personal topics, the moment when Damon had suggested she could help him identify rising talent at industry conferences. What did you understand that to mean? Williams asked. He said he was looking for promising professionals who might benefit from mentoring. He wanted to expand his network, help people advance their careers. Did he specify what kind of help he planned to provide? Lena's voice got smaller. He said he could offer guidance, connections, sometimes consulting opportunities that would supplement their income. And what was your role in this process? I was supposed to identify potential candidates. Women who seemed ambitious but unfulfilled, who might be interested in career advancement. Williams introduced the emails into evidence, dozens of them, showing Lena providing detailed profiles of her female colleagues. Names, backgrounds, marital status, professional frustrations, even personal vulnerabilities that might make them susceptible to Damon's approach. Mrs. Morell, I want to show you Exhibit 47. Williams pulled up an email on the courtroom's display screen. This is a message you sent to Mr. Vossel about a colleague named Jennifer Walsh. Can you read the highlighted portion? Lena's voice was barely audible. Jennifer's been married 8 years but seems restless, mentions feeling unappreciated at home, ambitious but stuck in a regional territory, might respond well to validation from a successful executive. And what happened to Ms. Walsh? She attended the Denver conference where Damon was speaking. They had a relationship. A relationship that exposed her to a medical condition Mr. Vossel had failed to disclose? Yes. Williams continued the methodical destruction of any remaining sympathy for the defendants. Email after email, showing Lena's active participation in targeting vulnerable women. Financial records proving she'd been paid for her services. Phone transcripts revealing her knowledge of Damon's systematic deception about his medical condition. The worst part was listening to Lena describe how the conspiracy had evolved from networking to hunting. How she'd refined her targeting strategies based on which women proved most susceptible to Damon's manipulation. How she'd celebrated their successes and analyzed their failures like they were running a business. Because that's exactly what they'd been doing. During cross-examination, Damon's lawyer tried to paint Lena as the real mastermind, the manipulative spouse who'd seduced his client into criminal behavior. It was a desperate strategy that fell apart under scrutiny. The timeline was clear. Damon had been running his conference scam for years before he met Lena. She'd just helped him systematize it. Mrs. Morell, the defense attorney said, isn't it true that you initiated contact with my client? No, he approached me. But you were the one who suggested expanding the operation to multiple conferences? I suggested we could be more efficient in identifying candidates, but the basic concept was his. More efficient at targeting vulnerable women for exploitation? Lena flinched. I didn't think of it that way at the time. How did you think of it? As networking, as career development, as helping people make connections that could advance their professional lives. By encouraging them to have affairs with a married man who was deliberately concealing a medical condition? I didn't know about the medical condition until much later. But you knew he was married? Yes. And you knew these women were married? Most of them, yes. So you were actively facilitating adultery? Lena looked at the prosecutor, then at the judge, then back at the defense attorney. Yes. For money? Yes. How much money, Mrs. Morell? Over 8 months, approximately $12,000. $12,000 for helping a predator target vulnerable women? Williams objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard the number, seen Lena's shame, understood exactly what she'd sold herself for. When Lena stepped down from the witness stand, she looked directly at me for the first time since the trial began. I saw regret there, and fear, and something that might have been an apology. But mostly, I saw a stranger, someone who bore a physical resemblance to the woman I'd married, but shared nothing else with her. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 27 victims testified about their experiences with Damon, their shock at discovering his deception, the medical and emotional consequences of his manipulation. Lena's cooperation had helped prosecutors understand the full scope of the conspiracy, but it hadn't earned her much sympathy from the victims or their families. During the sentencing phase, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I'd spent weeks writing it, trying to capture what it felt like to discover that your spouse wasn't just unfaithful, but actively criminal. How it felt to realize that the person you'd trusted most in the world had been systematically destroying other people's lives for money. Your Honor, I said, standing at the podium where Lena had confessed her crimes. The defendant didn't just betray our marriage, she betrayed the basic human decency that makes society possible. She looked at vulnerable women and saw opportunities for profit. She turned other people's pain into her personal gain. I looked at Lena, sitting at the defendant's table in her navy suit, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness, where 7 years of marriage used to be. The defendant has expressed remorse and cooperated with this prosecution. Those are positive steps, but they don't change the fundamental fact that she chose to participate in the systematic exploitation of innocent people. They don't restore the trust she destroyed or heal the damage she caused. I paused, gathering my thoughts for the conclusion I'd rehearsed. I don't know if Lena Morel can be rehabilitated. I don't know if she truly understands the magnitude of what she's done. But I know that consequences matter. I know that people who choose to prey on others must face justice for those choices. And I know that the women she helped target deserve to see that justice served. Judge Morrison sentenced Damon to 12 years in federal prison. Lena received 3 years, with 2 years suspended and credit for time served under house arrest. She'd be free in 18 months, but her professional life was over. No pharmaceutical company would hire someone convicted of conspiracy and fraud. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to interview me about the case, about my marriage, about how it felt to watch my ex-wife testify against her criminal partner. I declined all interviews. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about justice for 27 women who'd trusted the wrong people. Ronnie found me in the parking lot, loading files into my car. "How you feeling?" he asked. "Tired, ready for this to be over." "It is over. Damon's going away for a long time, Lena's going to prison, the victims got their justice. You won." I thought about that word, won. What exactly had I won? My marriage was destroyed, my trust in people permanently damaged, my private life had become public entertainment. Lena would serve her time and eventually rebuild her life somewhere else. Damon would get out of prison in his 50s and probably find new ways to manipulate people. Nobody won, Ronnie. Some people just lost less than others. Fair enough. He handed me an envelope. Final bill. Though, honestly, this case paid for itself in publicity. I've got 3 new clients just this week. I opened the envelope and found a bill for $0. Ronnie, call it professional satisfaction. It's not often you get to take down someone who really deserves it. He shook my hand. What's next for you? I don't know. Maybe I'll stay at the university. Maybe look for something new. I've got time to figure it out. You're still young, Miles. Plenty of time to rebuild. I drove home through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past the grocery store where Lena and I used to shop, past the restaurant where we'd celebrated anniversaries, past the park where we'd once talked about our future. All of it felt like someone else's memories now. At home, I poured myself a drink and sat in my kitchen, looking at the granite countertop where I'd first shown Lena the photographs that ended our marriage. The house was quiet, empty, mine. No secrets, no lies, no conspiracies. Just silence and the satisfaction of consequences finally delivered. My phone buzzed with a text from Paul. Drinks tonight? Celebrate the end of the circus? I typed back, sure, Eli's at 8? See you there. I finished my drink and looked around the kitchen one last time. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what came next. Maybe I'd sell the house, move somewhere new, start over completely. Maybe I'd stay and rebuild here, reclaim the life that Lena's choices had destroyed. But tonight, I'd drink with my friend and celebrate the end of the most surreal chapter of my life. The chapter where I'd discovered that my wife was a criminal, that my marriage was a lie, and that sometimes the only way to find justice is to burn everything down and start over. The conference was over. The conspiracy was finished. The criminals were going to prison. And I was finally free.